My dad used to work with kitchen installations. It provided him with a near-endless supply of cardboard boxes. Boxes for refrigerators, ovens, microwaves, all kinds of appliances. At the end of every week, he would bring home a bunch of them, along with a pack of markers, and just let me go nuts with it. I would spend entire weekends in those make-believe worlds of mine. I would crawl into my box with a flashlight, drawing on the inner walls. One week, I'm a caveman, painting the story of my tribe. Another week, I'm an astronaut, charting the stars. There was always something to do, and my imagination would run wild. After a couple of years, they had to start recycling the boxes. Company policy. I replaced my boxes with screens, turning my inner world into outer stimulation. Looking back at it, it sounds kinda sad, but it really wasn't. It's just what happens once you realize your dreams can only reach so far. At the end of the day, you're still just sitting in a box. With a background like that, it's no wonder I've always chased escapism. I had the old school 3D glasses, the Virtual Boy system, and pretty much everything slapped with an immersion keyword on the box. I was a big Star Trek fan, drooling over the fantasy of the infinite holodeck. I was among the first to adopt the VR headset trend. Remember Google Glass? Yeah, I was all about that. With that said, I'm not a very exciting person. I work in startup financing and company incubation. I was attracted to the idea of helping new ideas get off the floor, but most of what I saw was pretty uninspired. A variation of a variation of a variation. It sells, sure, but none of them will be around in 50 years. It's all so contemporary, it lacks a vision. That is, until a couple of years ago. At that time, I was one of 4 people assigned to various projects. I was sort of in between clients when my boss dropped me a link to review. I thought it was a bit odd. I wasn't the first in line to be assigned. There was a guy who'd been waiting longer than me. That, and there was something about this message that piqued my interest.
Thought you'd like this.
It read,
First meeting went well. Seems legit. Up for a challenge?
The company used a placeholder name called Black Box. Very simple company profile, but the description really caught my attention. They were talking about designing the ultimate immersion platform using their, soon-to-be, patented in-house software and hardware system. There was very little public information available, but they'd reached out to us for financing. That was the first time in years that I thought about those cardboard boxes that my dad brought home, and how I'd sit inside for hours, wishing I was somewhere else. Just looking at my computer screen, the text sort of faded away. I could imagine myself sitting there on my bedroom floor, lighting up the box ahead of me with a flashlight. Maybe I wasn't really in finance. Maybe I was still just a kid, getting lost in another daydream. Wouldn't that be something? I accepted the job and got in contact with the CEO. For privacy reasons, I'll call her Victoria. She was eager to speak to me, so we booked a meeting the next day. I usually required a 3-day notice, but I was just as excited as she was. I don't know why. I could feel there was something new in the air. The next day, I took a 3-hour drive to a small town just outside Sioux Falls. There was a small office space where no more than 3 cars were parked, despite the sign telling me there were 6 different companies registered at the address. The dying hedges lining the street didn't bring much more credibility. The moment I parked, I saw someone step out the front door. Victoria was a couple of years older than me, just about reaching her mid-30s. She had this really flat hair, like she'd worn a helmet all day, and these really sunken eyes. She either had a horrible sleep schedule, or the stress was getting to her. Or hell, maybe that's just what she looked like. She came up to me and shook my hand before I even left the parking lot.
Thanks for coming on such short notice.
She beamed.
We're so excited to work with you.
Looking forward to it. I smiled. What can I expect to see today?
Oh, a full operations run-through, a projections presentation, a meet and greet with the team, and the system, of course.
The system? I nodded. The patented in-house?
Soon to be patented, yes. Patent pending. Fingers crossed.
She did a little dance and stepped back, inviting me to follow. I locked my car, threw my laptop over my shoulder, and watched as another car left the parking lot. Victoria was very clear about the workspace being temporary. There weren't many paintings on the walls, photos, or logos. There were no branded pens or papers. It was as if the entire company was in limbo, replaced with ever-present, to-be-decided stickers. That said, she had 4 separate employees working on the technical backline. Given the number of cars outside, I could tell at least some of them carpool. These people knew each other pretty well.
We started working on this a couple of years ago.
Victoria explained as she showed me around.
I got this friend, Kibble, who's an absolute wizard. He gave me the idea for a cross-synchronized immersion system based not on generative information, but parsed existing data from a...
She looked over at me. I was smiling and nodding, but she could tell she'd lost me along the way.
It's better if I show you.
Originally, she had planned on doing the product showcase at the end of the presentation. But after noticing the Star Trek pin on my laptop bag, she got excited. She could tell we were kindred spirits. Instead, she headed straight for the workshop. I say workshop, but what I really mean is a repurposed office where they'd moved out the cubicle walls. It was impossible to ignore their product prototype. The left side of the room was lined with screens, all running various computations in a flow code. In the middle of a room was a fairly expensive massage chair. There was a black box descending from the ceiling, held by a collection of metal wires. You could tell it was supposed to be a sort of helmet. They'd covered the windows with black drapes, leaving the light in the room to be entirely artificial.
There are several theories at work.
She explained.
First, there's the lightning. We'll be dimming to entirely artificial red light for acclimatization. Next, we'll be going through a quick tuning session.
I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to be, I said. Is it okay if I wear my glasses?
Oh, don't worry about it.
She said, waving me off.
Or wait, have you had any gooseberries?
Gooseberries?
I take that as a no.
She went ahead to one of the control panels and input a short one-line command. The text on the other screen slowly turned from a passive gray to an active white. The lights turned red as computer fans began to whir.
Have a seat,
she said.
It won't be as effective on the first session, but I think you'll see the potential.
The other employees joined us as I sat down in the big chair. They all folded their arms with a grin, looking at one another expectantly.
She's gonna run Fluffy.
One whispered.
Definitely Fluffy.
I prefer Bahamas.
Sighed another.
I could go for that.
No, we're doing Fluffy.
Victoria interjected.
You can do Bahamas on your lunch break.
One of the technicians pumped their fist, mouthing a silent score. I looked up into the black box above me, only now realizing how heavy this thing was. There was a reason it was suspended by such heavy cables. It didn't have a bottom panel, so I could easily stick my head in it. Hell, it was big enough to fit half my body.
All right, relax and lean back. This is a simple calibration session. It won't do much. Just think happy thoughts and try not to see it as a box.
I'm good with boxes, I remarked. You go ahead.
In that case, I'd like to introduce you to Fluffy.
The black box descended, slowly covering my entire field of view in darkness. It stopped just short of my shoulder, then it tightened a dark cloth around my neck, effectively sealing me inside. It was pretty flimsy, and there was a little thing I could pull at to open. It was basically like tightening the rim of a hoodie. Turning my head around, I could hear a couple of sounds coming from all over. In the background, I could hear Victoria saying something, but the sound was muffled. Seconds later, there was a click as her voice came through loud and clear.
All systems go. Keep your back straight and try to focus on the light.
Light. Gotcha. There was no light. I blinked and looked around, but there was no light.
It can take a couple seconds.
Victoria said over the speakers.
It doesn't really run a program as much as a series of prompts to parse information relevant to the user. What we're calling fluffy is just the standardized version, but it really is a different experience tailored to every user.
I'm not sure I understand what kind of experience we're talking about here.
Still no light?
There was. It was like seeing a distant flashlight in a dark room, but there it was. My first instinct was to try and walk towards it. I was sitting down, but I could feel the sensation of my body lurching forward. I could feel my feet impact with gravel, moving under the sole of my shoe. At the same time, I could still feel the leather of the chair. Two conflicting experiences at once. It was disorienting, to say the least. I recoiled a little.
Sorry, I should have said to be still.
Victoria groaned.
You don't want to move around too much without proper calibration.
The light came closer. Then, in the blink of an eye, it enveloped my entire field of view. I was standing in a small gray room. The floor was covered in gravel, and the walls had simple, white, placeholder textures. I couldn't see where the light was coming from. Looking down, it looked like I was wearing some kind of all-white robe. Even with the box surrounding me, I could hear the cheers and snickering of the team. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The shock of someone new seeing Fluffy for the first time. And then, just a couple of feet ahead of me, was the biggest tiger I'd ever seen. Fluffy was bigger than a horse. I could hear its breath and see every fiber of its fur moving with perfect realism. As the tiger circled me, I could see the twist and turn of every muscle and tendon.
You're looking at a picture-perfect simulation.
Victoria said over the speakers.
While our range is limited, the technology involved is unique. Without moving your legs, try to reach out.
I could feel my arm staying at my side, and at the same time, it moved. Again, two separate inputs. As I reached out, the tiger brushed up against me. I could feel its cold, wet nose, the coarse whiskers, and its closed eye as it leaned in for a scratch. Its purrs were so loud that it made my skin tremble. I could smell the jungle on its fur and see the reflection in its eyes. Apparently, I just looked like some kind of crash dummy default humanoid. It felt real. Every part of the experience felt real. No part of me will believe meeting a creature like that with my physical body would be any different. When the program terminated, my legs were shaking. I could still feel the morning dew of Fluffy's fur on my hands. Good thing I was sitting down, or my knees would have buckled. I was gasping for air. Not because the box was warm, but from adrenaline. Every part of my body believed I'd been standing in front of a massive predatory cat monster. The team turned off the red lights and applauded me.
Congratulations on your first run,
Victoria said.
What'd you think?
I don't know where to start, I admitted. How are you doing this? How is this possible?
There'll be a full presentation after lunch. Alan, our lead engineer, will be happy to go over the details.
A man with glasses thicker than mine waved at me from the other side of the room. He adjusted the collar on his well-starched shirt.
This is just the beginning.
Victoria said.
Once we get this right, there's no end to what we can do. If this is blowing your mind...
She shook her head and looked over at her team.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
There was a whole science behind the tech they were showing. They were using something called an echo drive to bring out the vast amount of information necessary at close to no delay. Users could be tempered to reduce the lag further. The red lights helped, but you would have to subject yourself to hours of exposure for any tangible effect. The other thing was a diet of gooseberries. There was something about trace elements of a hormone. All in all, I was floored. No matter how much they explained it, it all seemed like magic to me. My head was spinning with the sensation of touching the fur of the giant beast, feeling it slip between my fingers. The whiskers were so coarse, and the nose so wet and cold. I could trace the textures of its skin on my fingertips. I couldn't believe I was the only one freaking out about it. I brought in my official recommendation to my boss later that evening. There was no doubt in my mind that we had to see where this was going. He agreed. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Victoria and her team as they moved into an incubator space next door. It wasn't a long-term solution, but compared to what they had been using, it was a godsend. I was their official pipeline, so I dropped in a couple of times a week to see how things were progressing, both financially and otherwise. Victoria didn't seem to mind. She was confident in their product, and why shouldn't she be? The week they finished their move, I ran into her on a late Friday afternoon. I waved at her as she got off to work, and she waved back. I was just about to get in my car when she called out to me.
Hey, have you seen the episode The Inner Light?
She asked from across the parking lot. The Next Generation, right? Season 5? Of course it was. It was my favorite episode. It was a lot of people's favorite episode.
We had a talk about it at lunch. I argued it's the best episode of TNG. Alan prefers Darmok.
That's a good one too. Victoria snorted and crossed her arms, leaning back against her car. She looked at me for a couple of seconds, squinting a little.
You mind if we have a chat?
She asked.
I got a couple of questions.
You want to book a time on Monday, or... She shrugged.
I thought we'd just grab a beer or something.
I didn't mind. We stopped by a pub downtown and both got a booth on the far end. Victoria ordered a cheese platter. We got a couple of complimentary olives, all of which she promptly scooched to her side of the table, wielding a toothpick as a tiny wizard's wand.
You didn't fund us just because you like our vibe, right?
She asked. I wish, I said. I'm still having nightmares about Fluffy.
It's very different from person to person. Some people don't see him at all. Most feel like it's watching a 3D movie.
No, I said, shaking my head. I was there, like, really there.
Alan gets that way too. Can't stop telling me about it.
She got her cheese platter. She didn't mind sharing it, unlike the olives. I admit the whole thing doesn't make sense, I said. I don't get what you're doing, but if you can control what you showed me, on a large scale, it'll change everything.
We're getting there.
She nodded.
We're ramping up a new model in about a week. Alan's doing safety testing.
You need that? Safety testing?
Well, there's a bunch of things we haven't accounted for. The effects of dehydration, prolonged exposure, all kinds of stuff. Alan figured if someone as sensitive as him can go through it, we're golden.
So he's testing it on himself? Victoria shrugged, popping another cheese cube.
I mean, it was his suggestion. He built the damn thing. He knows what he's doing.
As Victoria and her team got settled, and we started looking for outside investors, I got a first-hand look at how the team operated. Alan really was the core of the team. He'd been the one to write out the initial parsing software, but the question of where he got it from didn't really make any sense. They explained the Echo Drive as public domain property, but couldn't specify what it was. I got the impression that they didn't really know. I got to try the black box a couple of times. The Bahamas program was simple. You sit in a chair in the sunny Bahamas, watching the waves crash against a pristine beach. It really was realistic. You could smell the salt of the sea and hear the breeze as it danced between the palm trees. I'm convinced I would have gotten a 10 if I'd stayed there any longer. Alan was intense about his dedication to the project. While Victoria and the team were eager to make progress, Alan was pushing boundaries. He had his own office with a constant red light, and there were always fresh gooseberries in a bowl on his desk, anything to make him more susceptible. I was there on the first trial run of the new prototype. The box looked a little different. Alan was going over precautions and safety checks as he instructed one of the other engineers what programs to run, and in what order. It barely made any sense to me. There were some compiler errors, but they kicked their way through it. As the box finally descended over his head, he spoke out loud.
I'll be going in for 1 hour.
He explained.
Blank canvas. I'll try a generative experience and see what happens. No holds barred.
Safe word is pineapple.
Victoria grinned.
Good luck in there.
The box locked into place with a click, and I saw the programs running on the screens along the wall. Everything was compressed to where letters had been broken into symbols and shortcuts, to the point where it wasn't even legible. It was some kind of compressed language where, instead of saying full lines of code, you could just type a single symbol. Efficient, but completely alien. When Alan finished his hour in the machine, he stared blankly ahead, slightly cross-eyed. It looked like he'd been hit over the head with a shovel. Victoria gave him a couple of seconds.
Alan?
She asked.
You okay there?
He looked up at her with one eye, then the other. His pupils retracted as a smile crept up. He nodded, slowly.
Yeah,
He murmured.
I was an astronaut.
An astronaut? We got a program for that?
No, you can just...
He trailed off as he got up. The moment his feet hit the ground, he collapsed. As the others rushed over to help him, he waved them off.
You can just be an astronaut.
He continued.
It lets you do that.
He looked around as the red light slowly switched to white. I could tell his eyes were bloodshot.
How long was I out?
He asked.
It was just an hour.
Victoria explained.
60 minutes on the dot.
No way that was just an hour. Ain't no way unless there's...
He looked at the screens, then back at the box. It was hung from the ceiling, descending from the metal wires. They were slightly thicker than the previous prototype. He did a little jig as he rushed up to the box, kissed it, and turned to me with a pointed finger.
We're gonna make so much money.
As development accelerated, we had to start working on more practical details. Presentation was one thing, but ergonomics was another. Instead of relying on a massage chair, we were looking at custom-built furniture designed for the experience. Instead of being suspended from the ceiling, we discussed having a sort of fishbowl design attached to the top of the chair. Victoria insisted on keeping the box design though, claiming the soul of the company was in its square, retrofuturistic charm. Alan went through rigorous testing. A couple of times per week, they would book him for a session, lasting anywhere from 1 hour to 5 hours straight. Most of the time when he came back out, he would look like he'd been run over by a pack of wildebeests. Other times he'd be fine and almost skip out of the chair, but there was something that wasn't quite right. I think I was the only one to notice. It was just after a standard 2-hour session. They were trying out a surge protection failsafe, checking to see that a sudden disconnect didn't cause any harmful side effects. As they pulled the plug and the box retracted, Alan got up as usual. They checked his blood pressure and pulse, making notes on a chart. He kept looking back at the box. Whenever he thought the others weren't looking, he glanced at it. His feet were angled towards it, not towards the door or the others, but back at the box. If you looked closely at his body language, you could tell what he was really thinking. He was eager to go back. While the others were busy working on the prototype and getting into the practical details, I was keeping my eye on Alan. I could tell there was something off. Something changed in the way he moved. And there was a twist in the tone of his voice. I could tell Victoria noticed it too. We exchanged a couple of glances whenever he entered the room. He would schedule sudden sessions without anyone's clearance. Victoria had to shut him down a couple of times, insisting he adhere to protocol. He would agree, of course, but would still do it whenever he could get away with it. It got to the point where they had to threaten to take him out of the tryouts entirely unless he got back in line. Other changes were more subtle. For example, he stopped wearing his thick glasses. He claimed he was using contact lenses, but I couldn't see them. He stopped adhering to a strict 6 p.m. dinner time. But most telling of all was his diet of gooseberries. He stopped eating them, seemingly overnight. Now, was that because he didn't like them anymore, or because he didn't need them? One Monday, as I was scheduled for a meeting with Victoria, I walked from the parking lot and straight into chaos. As soon as I opened the front door, people were running back and forth, yelling at one another. There was one guy off in the corner crying his eyes out. He had blood on his hands. I pushed ahead towards the prototype room. Victoria was on her knees to what looked like Alan. She was covering his eyes with her hand, and there was blood seeping between her fingers. One of the other technicians was by the console, making notes with a shaky hand. As I entered, Victoria released her hold on Alan and pointed at me.
You.
She yelled.
Out of the way, EMTs are coming.
I got a better look at Alan's face. His eyes were blood-swollen and red like a pomegranate. There were so many popped blood vessels that I couldn't tell where his eyes were looking anymore. He didn't seem to mind. He was smiling from ear to ear. As the EMTs came to take him away, Victoria followed in her car. I stayed behind to get a better idea of what had happened. Turns out that previous Friday, as everyone left, Alan had scheduled an extra session on his own. He knew enough to get the prototype running without any help. He'd completely jacked the timer, setting the safety lock on repeat. Instead of a 2-hour session, he basically had unlimited access. He'd left the whole system running from Friday night to Monday morning, doing more calibration than all of our previous sessions combined. He was inside that system for at least 60 hours, doing who knows what. As the engineers reviewed the data, one of the junior developers came up to me. A mousy young woman with a ponytail like a bird's nest.
"We need to see what he's been doing,"
she said.
"The system is still running, and we have to salvage this. Would you mind taking a look?"
Me? Why?
"You're the only one here who's gotten similar readings as Alan. I don't think anyone here could understand what they're seeing in there. You have a chance."
Isn't it dangerous?
"It's just a quick look, a couple minutes."
I nodded at that. A quick look wouldn't hurt. They disinfected the chair down. They pretty much had to. Alan hadn't much cared for hygiene. I sat down and took a deep breath. As the box descended, one of the assistants handed me a couple of gooseberries.
"Just munch on 1 or 2. It helps with the nausea."
I did as they asked. Gotta say, not a fan of the flavor. The box came down and locked in place. The system was in standby mode, but as soon as the seal tightened on my neck, the box lit up. It didn't take long for a light in the distance to envelop my senses. I heard the chatter of the junior developers fade away. I was standing inside some kind of room of one-way mirrors. I could see a forest and a river. There were houses in the distance, mid-century neo-colonial architecture. They looked Midwestern. I was stuck inside this floating box suspended over a rushing river, about 8 feet into the air. It was beautiful, but I didn't really understand the long-term appeal. As I took a few careful steps, I could feel the duality of experiences. My body was still in that chair, in the office, but I was also projecting a body from the prototype. I could touch the one-way walls and feel a cold, smooth texture. All the while I was sitting still, doing nothing. The junior developer was right. The gooseberries helped. I barely felt any nausea at all. The thought crossed my mind that this couldn't possibly be all there was to it. Alan could have traveled to the stars, or seen world history play out. Instead, he was just here, doing nothing. As I thought about it, something changed. The box moved. In the blink of an eye, the walls and the floors faded away. Suddenly, I was in the blinding light. I shielded my eyes and turned away, only to realize I'd been staring at the unfiltered power of the sun. I was looking down at the world, the vast blue Mother Earth in all her resplendence, the storms creeping over the Himalayas to the waves of the Pacific Ocean. I could see it all from above, turning beneath my feet. I stared in a sort of dumbstruck awe. It'd been so sudden and so vastly beautiful. I lost track of time, letting my mind wander. There were so many possibilities, and as my imagination touched on a stray thought, everything changed again. In another moment, I was a gazelle bounding across the Serengeti. I could feel the blades of grass on my rough tongue, and the weight of the antlers on my forehead. It was so intuitive. It didn't need a tutorial or a pop-up telling me what to do. In that moment, I was a gazelle. I'd always been a gazelle. I knew to turn my head to follow the wind, breathing a sigh of relief as there was no whiff of an encroaching predator. In another moment, I was a blue whale, breaching the surface after a dive into the depths of the ocean. Later, I was a street musician somewhere in Munich, counting the coins dropped at my feet. I was a bird, a coyote, a badger, a queen bee, surrounded by the noise and instinct at every twist and turn of my design. I was a man, a woman, I was old, and a newborn child. Had it been minutes or hours? Did it matter? Why would I want to leave? After a while, I realized I was a child, playing in a cardboard box. I was drawing on the walls, making up my own little world to play in. I couldn't even feel my body in the chair anymore. Had it ever really been there? Maybe I wasn't a startup financier. Maybe I was still a kid on the floor, playing with my cardboard box. It made sense, right? There's no such thing as black boxes and strange prototypes. There's no holodeck. Escapism starts and stops at our hands and eyes. So what was more likely to be true? Then again, if you can be anything, what's the point in sticking to a single name, thing, and place? What's so wrong with being a gazelle, too? I shook my head and heard my hair scratch against the cardboard box. The simulation was messing with me. I'd been in long enough. It was time to quit. I tried to raise my hands to remove the box, only to realize I couldn't feel them anymore. I couldn't feel the chair, or the tightened fabric around my neck.
Hello?
I called out. It was a kid's voice.
I'm done now,
I said.
Get me out.
A curious middle-aged woman peeked her head in front of another room.
You all right there, sweetie?
Anytime now.
But nothing happened. No one was listening. I was there all day. I tried to force myself back into my mind, but I couldn't do it. I tried to write down my name, address, and workplace, but I couldn't get the letters right. I tried to draw a picture of myself, but my hand-eye coordination refused to cooperate. I tried telling the strange woman I was a startup financier, and that this was all just one big simulation. She thought it was funny until she realized how distressed I was. I had dinner with those people. I knew their names, and I had memories of who they were. It wasn't just a strange woman. She was Mom. Dad was at work, installing kitchenware. I had dinner. They made me brush my teeth and put me to bed. I tried reading my own bedtime story just to show that I could, but the words were jumbled up. Whoever I was couldn't read, so it was as if the world didn't let me. All I saw were those strange symbols, like from the console. As I went to sleep that night, I didn't know who I was anymore. It didn't make sense. It didn't make a lick of sense. In the middle of the night, someone pulled the box from my head. I woke up in a daze on the floor. I'd never been so nauseous. I could smell blood, and my tongue was swollen. I'd bitten the tip off.
Hey.
Someone called out, snapping their fingers.
Look at me.
I tried, but there were so many eyes to see from. There was the startup financier, lying on the floor. The kid looking up at their bedroom ceiling. A gazelle looking up at the night sky. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. My eyes rolled back and forth in my skull, looking for something to hold on to, something real. They tried grabbing my hand and slapping it. The pain came to me like a slow wave, crashing harmlessly against my skin and dissipating long before I could react. They could have shot me, and I wouldn't have felt a thing. It's like it was only happening to a part of me, a tiny, pointless part.
Stay with me,
a voice said.
Stay here. Don't go back.
But I couldn't tell which ears were hearing it. After a couple of hours, the other places seemed to fade. I was rolled up in a blanket and brought to the hospital. I'd really done a number on my tongue, but the only permanent damage was biting the tip off and swallowing it. The bleeding looked bad, but it wasn't life-threatening. That's what they told me in the ambulance. I was barely coherent. Turns out, I was in the machine for 6 minutes in total. 6 minutes. My mouth had cramped, still eating gooseberries, hence why I bit my tongue. It would take me days to recover, maybe weeks. I remember laying in a hospital bed, looking up at the ceiling. I couldn't help but reach into the back of my mind, checking to see if I was still in that chair. Who's to say this experience is the real one? Maybe I was still a gazelle, dreaming about some absurd nightmare. Or maybe I was about to wake up in my bed, looking up at a different ceiling. There was no way to tell for sure. At some point in the night, I turned my head to the left. I was sharing the room with another patient. Made sense. There had been 2 of us coming from the same workplace. I could make a pretty safe bet as to who was on the other side of the plastic cover. I heard noises as paper-thin covers were pushed aside. Bare feet slapped against the linoleum floor. A shadow circled the room, only to step out in front of me. Alan. They'd covered his eyes in cotton and surgical tape. I couldn't focus on his eyes, making the white cotton look like a wide-eyed stare. He was holding a balloon and a flower, a blue sunflower, probably from the gift shop.
You want this?
He asked. I couldn't answer. My mind was misfiring. Trying to raise an arm or speaking a word triggered something else, in another place. I opened and closed my mouth, like a fish out of water. Alan shrugged, leaving the sunflower at my feet.
Get well.
He walked out, his eyes still taped shut. And yet, he seemed to know exactly where to go. The next day I learned he had walked out to the hospital, wandered just off the highway all the way back to the office, and started the prototype up again, all while completely blind. He'd sat down in the machine, fired up his program, and his heart stopped dead. It only ran for a couple of seconds. Once I was out of the hospital, my boss had pulled the financing from Black Box and swept the whole thing under the carpet. There was no way to keep a startup going after a fatal accident at that stage. Even with a completely new product, the whole thing was going to be tainted. The patent never made its way through the proper channels. Victoria and her team eventually started another company looking into more traditional experience hardware. I think they were working on some kind of spa treatment last I checked. I got better, but it took a long time to get that icky feeling of losing myself out of my system. I would wake up at night thinking I was something else. Sometimes, I would stop to think thoughts that I knew weren't my own. I'll turn my head towards the wind, trying to catch the scent of encroaching predators. And I don't know for sure how much damage it's done. Did I really play with cardboard boxes as a child? Or is that just a memory that stuck after this experience passed? I don't know for sure. I don't think I'll ever know. I still think about those days. We were looking for the perfect escape, and, in a way, I think we found it. But what are we really escaping from? And what do we do when we get it? If you can be anything, everywhere, what's there to keep you from losing yourself? Then I think about Alan. He clawed his way back to the office, turned the machine back on, and died. But in those seconds, what did he see? Was he even Alan anymore? If not, who was I talking to? Did it even have a name? I'm glad to be working on simple things nowadays. I don't want to think too much about the implications of my experience. When I do, I get all tingly in my hands and there's this faint itch in the back of my brain. Like there's a part of me still sitting in that chair, waiting for someone to pull the plug. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's story. I want to thank saturdead, who gave me permission to read it. And for all our voice actors. Jack Harrison, who voiced the boss. Bush, who was the assistant. Marie Fields, who voiced Victoria. Zyreth, who voiced Employe One. Obvious Nick, who was Employe Two. Karen's Tales, who voiced Alan. Bedtime's Menagerie, who voiced the Mousy woman. Spirit Voices, who voiced the curious middle-aged woman. And Wormhouse, who voiced the rescuer. I also want to thank my patrons, and especially Shadowthread Stories.